please help me to welcome to our stage Justin Foster.
Do you really think all you're here to do is sit in a pew or a cubicle zoo? Lay on the couch, drift through life, lie to your spouse about who you really are? Do you really think that God is found in a place other than your heart? That there's only one way, and if you don't follow it, you're condemned? That we're to follow a book of rules? Do you really think God thinks we're fools? Do you really think going to school gives you an education? That it's not just indoctrination? To live someone else's life, pay your taxes, buy shit you don't need, and paint on a smile? Do you really think if you thought for yourself, you would have the same friends? Would they reject you, shame you, talk about you behind their hands? Call you lost, call you crazy because you're not one of them? You are here to do something great, something important, something brave. You are a whole human with a wild soul. You are a work of cosmic art. You are free. You are no one's slave. So, thank you to Creative Mornings. That's the first time I've ever read something I wrote in public. So I wanted to share a little bit about my roots, and then a root you have growing in you that maybe because you identify as a creative is something that will resonate with you. And our root is our identity. It's who we really are. And I grew up on a cattle ranch in eastern Oregon. This is outside of Baker City, Oregon. Anybody ever been to Baker City? How do you know Baker? Oh, how about that? All right, go Beavers. So I grew up, on a 60,000-acre cattle ranch, and I was surrounded by art there. My grandmother was a painter and a sculptor, and my dad, despite his issues, was a fantastic artist. And then we were big fans of Charlie Russell and Frederick Remington, and so art was something that was important to me. But I never really identified as an artist. I didn't know what I was. I also grew up in a fundamentalist church, and nothing really takes your identity like fundamentalism. And it gives you, it takes yours and gives you another one. But I'm very proud of my roots. How many of you were raised around agriculture? Okay, so that's a significant thing. That number seems to go down every year. And it's important, I think, and this is why I believe very strongly in urban farming and local sourcing and all that, is because when we get disconnected from our food supply, something abstract happens to that. Something abstract happens where we don't realize that it's farmers and ranchers that feed us. So that's my little shout out to my past of growing up on a ranch. So I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I was for 44 years, maybe. I knew who I thought I was. I knew that I wasn't going to be a cowboy on the ranch. I had enough of a exposure to the fact that feeding steers at 30 below was not something I wanted to do on an annual basis. It was a great life, but not for me. I went to college and I dropped out 3 times. I got married very young. I was 18 when I got married. We had Logan, our older son, when I was 22, so he's 27 now. And you just get sucked into the vortex of just trying to stay alive. We were very poor. I didn't have a college education. I had to plead, beg, and barter to get into various jobs, but I worked my way up. And so my identity for many years was around resilience and overcoming, but it was deeply rooted in insecurity. I had terrible imposter syndrome. And I wrote my first book in 2011, and that helped a little bit, to have a book out. That helped a little bit. Turning 40 helped a little bit, but something was still missing. And there was this disconnect. There was no root. There were my roots where I was from. There were these roots of the things that I'd left, but I didn't know who I was. And then in 2014, I had like an awakening. It's a story for another time, but it just happened one day, kind of out of the blue, and I saw me. And a part of the story, I was in the gym, and I was working out, and I looked in the mirror, and I saw like this vision of me with a lion head. And I got done working out, and my partner, my wife, said, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "I just met myself. And I see what I am." And not long after that, these musings, these ideas, these words came to me. And if you follow me on Instagram, at Foster Thinking, you can see these. They come, and I just share them as I feel inspired to. Those didn't exist until the fall of 2014. If they did exist, it was in some sort of other dimension. And yet I still struggled to say I'm a creative. And but what I've learned along the way in the very recent years is that as the mission or the mantra of Creative Mornings is that we're all creatives. And this creativity that is inside of us is part of our identity. We're born with it. It is the closest thing we have to the divine, that we can make something. We can make art. We can make humans. We can make something that didn't exist before with materials that maybe have never been put together before. And that's almost like magic. But what happens is, if you don't identify as a creative, you are disconnected from that. And so when I say I met myself, I eventually began to understand that I too am a creative. And yet, I still doubted. So I thought, well, what's one way to just come right out and be a creative? That's read some shit you've never read before in public. So that's why I decided to start with that. So how many of you also have struggled with identifying as a creative? Yeah. And how many of you are really awesome at creativity? So keep your hand up if you also struggle with being a creative. Yeah. Think about that. We still live in a time, at least, especially in Austin, but it's a growing thing where art is appreciated or creativity is appreciated. It's a viable career. You know, I'm 49, so 20, 25, 30 years ago, being artistic was a pastime, and you did it after you had your career on the side, and it was that's all it was. But now you can, if you know who you are and you identify as a creative, you can organize your life around it. You can start a business around it. You can have a side gig. You can have a corporate career. You can do a lot of things identifying as a creative. And when you realize that your identity, which is your root chakra, it's the literal root of who you are, when you realize it's a creativity, some magical things happen. One is you take a lot less shit from people. And I think that in American culture in particular, we are very social conditioned to be a certain way. We are sort of the middle of Maslow's hierarchy, where we just need to be accepted. And in many cultures and many environments, being a creative is something that, even though maybe down inside of our identity, we realize that saying we're a creative is pushing back against 1,000 years of social conditioning that art is a pastime. And my idea behind this, and when I met with Ben, we talked about the theme, is what if just 10% more of the world, 10% more of Americans, 10% more people in Austin tapped into this root of creativity? One of the things about tapping into this root of creativity and your creative energy, and the reason I think a lot of people avoid it, is it will mess up your life. It will change your plans. It will change how your dynamics with the people in your lives. It creates separation from the false self that you had constructed in order to try to fit in society. And most of us don't want to go through that process of letting the illusion of who we are die. But what happens then as well, I think, is that creatives have this detachment from who they are sometimes, and that's what creates. We hear about like the artist angst, and you hear about Kurt Cobain and Amy Winehouse, and that sort of that angst around that. And I think it goes back to at some point you have to own this. You have to own this. You have to realize that you and what you're creating in the world is priceless. And yes, the world may put a price on it that is not viable for you to pay rent right now, but you're priceless. Your creative energy is priceless. You are the only one that has it. My favorite word in the English language is sovereign, sovereignty. And there's nothing more sovereign than art. And so here's why I think if just 10% more people did this, what would happen is it would be transformative to society. And it would transform the way that we see each other. It would transform the way that we look at our careers, the way that we make money, the way that we treat each other in society. It would be transformative. And we need creatives more than ever because average is still a thing. If you just watch some ads, watch the Northwestern Mutual stupid emu ads, or the fake burger from Burger King, or the Chevy ads, or this is my favorite new brand to hate, Bud Light Seltzer. Their slogan should be guaranteed to be litter. So, like, what sucks more than White Claw? So there's this prevalent mediocrity that's going out in there, and we're being told to settle. We're being told to compromise. And each of you that identify as a creative or are working like I am on just finally accepting that's who you are, we are the wall against that. It's us, our words, our pictures, our music, it's us. And it's no coincidence that whenever there's an evolutionary cycle in society, it's led by the artists. That's why they kill them first. It's led by the artists and the heretics. And that's us. This is why now you see where they try to shut down stand-up comedians. People on the far left shutting down stand-up comedians for being offensive. And people on the far right trying to shut up people from protesting or expressing themselves. When you create art, you're a direct threat to the institution. And that's a beautiful thing. Eugene Peterson, who was a Presbyterian minister, most famous for rewriting the Bible and calling it the Message, which didn't make the people on the right-wing conservatives very happy. He said, all art is offensive. All art is offensive to someone. And I think that when you live as who you truly are, and that's going to offend someone, and people are going to say, well, you can't do that. You can't dress like that. You can't talk like that. You can't make a living like that. And my younger son, Caden, lives here in Austin, and his Instagram handle is Reluctant Hobo. And he is a rising artist. He's really making a nice living as an artist, as a 21-year-old artist in Austin, Texas. And he's been very inspirational for me to kind of seize my own creativity and my own identity as a creative. And what has inspired me most about Caden is that he continued on despite a lot of other people telling him, well, you need a plan B or you need something else. And when he decided after he graduated, maybe even before he graduated from high school, he wasn't going to go to college, he was going to focus on his art, I asked him 3 questions. I said, are you willing to work on yourself? And he asked what that meant. I'm like, if you're going to show up as an artist or a creative in the world, you got to work on your own shit. You got to deal with your emotional stuff. You've got to take care of yourself physically, because art itself can be a fickle mistress and it can kill you. And so you need to take care of yourself. Are you willing to do that? He said yes. The second thing I asked him is, do you have a plan B? And we sat there eating ramen at Michi Ramen on North Lamar, and we sat there and he thought, and he was quiet. He got tears in his eyes. He goes, I don't have a plan B. And I'm like, good. I said, burn the fucking bridges. And the third thing I asked him is, are you willing to be poor for your art? And I said, you don't have to be poor. You don't have to be a starving artist. It's like George Carlin talks about starving artists just means you're a shitty artist. But I don't know if that's true or not. But anyway, and he said yes. And this has been tested multiple times, and so his life is a microcosm to me of the sacrifice and the commitment it takes to say, yes, I'm a creative. And yet he does it. He works 14, 16 hours a day. sometimes he has this deep passion for it. Last year, as happens to all of us that are on a creative path, there was a dip. There was a moment, what Stephen Pressfield refers to as the resistance. And the resistance was he just was struggling. He was asking me for help to pay for rent. And he says, I'm going to go get a job. And I'm like, all right. So he got a job in sales at GoDaddy. And it was good for him to be around other humans. He's a bit of a recluse. And he did that for 2 weeks, just training. He had day one of calling. He had day one where he was on calls. And he texted me and said, this is terrible. I hate it. I'm like, see if you feel it. Go back tomorrow. So I'm in Scottsdale about to meet with my business partner, Emily. And I get this text from him. He says, can I call you? And I said, sure. And he says, so he calls me and he's talking in kind of a quiet voice. He goes, I said, what are you doing? He goes, I'm at work. And I said, what's going on? He goes, I'm sitting here looking at this list of names of people that I got to call and bullshit. And I'm listening to everybody around me bullshitting people into buying stuff they don't need, and I can't do it. I said, then don't. That is your option. We'll find a way. And something came out of me then at that point, in this kind of a final thought before we turn it over to Q&A, is when you, I'll put it this way, the muse, fortune, providence, whatever you want to call that spiritual element that all creatives know, regardless of their belief system, that being, that entity, just call it providence. Providence is very attracted to courage. Something happens when you take bold steps forward with your art. Even if you're doing it at the same time that you're doing your career, and maybe you don't want to be reading actuary tables or being a server while playing side gigs or doing something like that, but you're taking steps forward. And faith, as a creative, is a funny thing because it only reveals the next step that's about to happen. We don't know. We don't know what's around the bend. You know, maybe half of us will be millionaires, a few years if we keep grinding. Who knows what's going to happen? But providence, fortune, the muse, favors boldness. It favors moving forward and seizing who you are. And when you tap into that root, this is one of the promises of sort of natural law, that your root will produce fruit. And if you know who you are and you tap into that sacral energy of who you are, you too will then see, you will then fully identify as a creative because that's who you are. This is not a costume you're putting on. It's a revelation. It's the shifting of perspective. And when you do that, it produces fruit in the world, and the world needs what you have to create. It needs it desperately, even if it doesn't know how to pay for it. Thank you. Thank you.
High five?
Yeah,
Which one?
high five.
High five?
And a hug.
All right.